Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course, this is my co-host.
My name is Chris Huddleston.
And today we're both very excited to be talking to you about a classic from our youth, Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
It's getting pretty tough coming up with new illnesses. It's a little childish, but then so is high school.
Annie, you're not going to school like this.
Call if you need us.
They bought it. How could I possibly be expected to handle school on a day like this?
Bueller.
Cameron, babe, get dressed and come on over.
Bueller.
He has been absent 9 times.
Bueller.
My father spent 3 years restoring this car.
I guess that's my dad. What are we gonna do?
What aren't we going to do?
Why should he get to ditch?
Something's going on. Say, Ferris?
I hate him.
Life moves pretty fast. You're crazy! If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
He's very popular, Ed. They think he's a righteous dude.
Do you have a synopsis for us, Mr. Huddleston?
I do. This is the one from Rotten Tomatoes, and it's a little, it's kind of funny, but Ferris Bueller, Matthew Broderick, has an uncanny skill at cutting classes and getting away with it. Intending to make one last duck out before graduation, Ferris calls in sick, borrows a Ferrari, and embarks on a one-day journey through the streets of Chicago. On Ferris's trail is high school principal Rooney, determined to catch him in the act. It makes it sound like he's just all by himself, but
I know.
It's a John Hughes directed film, and it came out in 1986. We both have seen this, I imagine, numerous times, but how long had it been since you had watched this, and how did you feel revisiting it?
I mean, it's been decades since I saw it, and I thought it was delightful. I think it really stands up. I'm interested to try and, I don't have a thesis and I haven't done any homework on this. I'm interested to try and chop it up with you because I think there's, in there somewhere is this sort of vision of childhood and life as kind of depicted through a 1986 lens. And I don't know, we could get kind of deep on it, but what are your first blush takes?
Same for me. It had been quite a while since I saw this, and I almost could have not rewatched it just because I saw it so many times. I saw this in the movie theater and then watched it over and over and over again as a kid. And it's funny, this is one of certain things from this movie. I still will say the line where he says, "Never had one lesson." I'll still say that today, And I can remember I've only been to Chicago once, but I went to Chicago not long after this came out, and we went up in the Sears Tower, and my cousin and I did the thing where, we put our faces against the glass and everything. So it's, I feel like I say this every time we watch something that was a seminal movie of our youths. So it's always hard for me to separate the nostalgia, but I mean, I feel like this movie holds up really well, and it's something that there's not really much about it that it couldn't just be a story today, other than they just don't have cell phones, and other than that, you know what I mean? There's not. I don't think it's too. I don't know that it would be too out of place with. I mean, I don't know that much about experiences of teenagers today, but I don't see how. I think young people could watch this and relate to it the same way that we did. I felt also you're looking at these movies from through an adult's eyes as opposed to a child, and it's funny to see how gullible his parents are, and all that. I can remember as a kid not liking Cameron just because he's such a sad sack, and maybe this time around I felt a little more, had a little more empathy for Cameron. But I saw a line from Matthew Broderick just a couple of weeks ago randomly, and he said, he said, I've gone from playing the coolest teenager who ever lived to now he's just dads, in movies. But so I don't know. What do you want to unpack?
Well, you touched on it there, is like separating the nostalgia, because that was sort of the life I wanted to live when I was a kid and I watched that. Not so much the affluence, although, there's not poor people depicted in this film, but the confidence. He's just got unflagging confidence that gets him through a number of hilarious comic sort of situation comedies, setups. And there isn't a mean spirit to it. I
No.
didn't occur to me the first time I watched it, but if we had to pick scenes that I wanted to do, sort of seminal scenes in this, one of them would be the parade scene, which is really the only time we sort of showcase the diversity of Chicago. He gets up on the float and he sings Danke Schoen. He lip syncs Danke Schoen, and then he lip syncs Shake It Up Baby. And it wasn't ever really clear to me. They sort of present it as though he's singing it, although it's just the original tracks,
Yeah.
But he gets the whole city dancing and cheering and together. And that's the closest thing to a sort of a thesis moment for me in this latest rewatching of John Hughes saying this kind of optimism, this kind of worldview can be infectious and it can bring people together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hardly profound in the movie. In the movie, it's actually sort of, they clap him on the back and it's sort of this gesture towards fame, like, oh, wow, you've got the it factor. But as an adult watching it, I thought, there's really something deeper for me in just kind of attitude and how we choose to approach life, right? And the shenanigans they get into aren't hurting anybody. They don't.
No, other than they take the dad's car, but that's
they
really
sort of steal the dad's car.
Yeah, but otherwise they don't. They're not like committing vandalism. They're not stealing for people. They're just having fun, and he's trying to get Cameron to have fun.
Yeah. And Cameron is depressed because he has a bad relationship with his father, whom he feels doesn't love him, who he feels is obsessed with, wealth and accumulation in the car and objects, and can't relate to his own son. So, I think to me, what I saw for the first time in this viewing was that juxtaposition of, if you choose that path, you alienate everyone around you, but in particular the people closest to you. And if you choose the sort of Bueller path of really seize the day, really suck the marrow out of life, and follow your joy, and don't let anybody scare you off of that. It's a pie in the sky vision, of course. It's a fairy tale. But it made for a delightfully fun movie. And young Matthew Broderick, of course, this is before he killed some bicyclist in Europe. And it's been a complicated life for that guy. But at the time, he's really young in this movie. He's really good looking. And it's a very silly, cartoony movie. There's lots of little sequences that do nothing to forward the plot. They're just like little Looney Tunes, like with the clarinet. He has a little hat on, and the camera's low, and he plays the clarinet. Like I say plays, he just sort of toodles the clarinet tunelessly into the camera, and then he goes, never had one lesson. And then he goes back to toodling it, right? And the whole plot of the movie stops for a minute there while we have that funny little scene, but it's delightful and we're remembering it.
Well, and another thing that I was thinking about that he does throughout this, and I was trying to think of another movie prior to this that I would have seen as a child, where he breaks the fourth wall throughout the film. And the only thing I was thinking maybe that like would have seen as a kid, like Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck, breaking the fourth wall, that happened. where I remember the one cartoon with Daffy Duck where he literally talks to the animator and the animator's like
Right.
erasing him and all
That's
that.
very meta, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, they did a lot of meta stuff in those cartoons, but
And then Bugs Bunny, so he's talking to the camera the whole time, and it turns out that who he's really talking to, the animator, turns out to be Bugs Bunny, who then turns to the camera.
Yeah.
Right? So Daffy, we think Daffy's talking to us, and then it turns out he's talking to Bugs Bunny, who then turns and talks to us.
It's super meta before probably the term meta probably didn't even exist. But he, you know, he breaks the fourth wall, and I don't think I ever thought about this before watching it this time. No one else acknowledges that he breaks the fourth wall, and nobody else breaks the fourth wall, right?
Right.
So it's not like there's anything strange about it, you know. But that just seemed interesting to me this time watching it. Is like, you know, is that something that the other characters are not aware of? You know, we never find out in the movie.
There's lots of interesting maturity to it too. There's a scene in which the car turns out that the car gets taken for a joyride, and that the dad knows what's on the odometer, and they are going to put a few miles on it just by taking the car. But
let me stop you for 1 second. I have something that's related to that. There is supposedly, this is one of these things where remakes and reboots and prequels and all this stuff get to be crazy. There is, I don't know if this is finalized or not, but I read an article that they are working on either a movie or a series about those guys that took the car. It's like, who wants to see that? I mean, what an odd thing to... But yeah, that's supposedly in the works.
Okay. I'm not interested. But
no.
So Cameron, whose father's car it is, goes into this sort of catatonic state of shock, and they're trying to snap him out of it. And at one point I don't know if they're at Sloane's house or whose house there are, but he is on a chair on the diving board, which doesn't, like, how'd they get him there? Like, if he's catatonic, how they got to put a chair on the diving board and he's sitting on the chair. And Sloane and Ferris are in their underwear in the hot tub. And then Cameron sort of tumbles into the water, falls face first into the water, and they rush out and haul him out. And he splutters, and there's a moment of revelation. But where I'm going to is Sloane says, did you see me change out of my clothes, Cameron? Like, or were you catatonic? Like, were you aware? And he's kind of like, oh, cool. And they make a sweet moment out of it. But what I thought was really striking about that was neither Ferris nor Sloane. She says, I'm not embarrassed, you know. But neither of the characters, Sloane or Ferris, seem ruffled by it. And I thought, for a depiction of high school students, you know, it's not like she's ashamed. It's not as though he's jealous. And those in 80s movies, that would be the default cartoon depiction of, right? There's this shame about the bodies, and there's this, you know, being spotted when you're not aware of being seen, right? It's a trope that comes up again and again in 80s movies and is exploited in different ways, and it just wasn't the case in this. And I had the thought, and he, as a high school senior and Sloane's a junior, they make a light of it, but he asks her to marry him, and she says, you're crazy, you know, what are you talking about? But then the two of them are sort of thinking about it, and he has an aside to the camera. This is what am I going to do? I'm going to go away to college next year. She's got another year of high school. I mean, where can this go? You know, but I'm crazy about her. But he has this kind of clear-eyed chat with us, right? The same people to whom he plays the clarinet. About this very real thing I remember from high school. You're dating somebody, you're going to go to different colleges, you know, you feel like you're in love, but there's a part of your brain that's mature enough to say, like, how often does that really work out, you know? And then there's a moment where she says he's going to, you know, he's going to marry me or I'm going to marry him. And so the movie doesn't spend a lot of time focusing on the evolution of these characters in their lives because it is a big cartoon romp. But that stuff is in there. And I think I just sort of skated past it as a kid when I was watching it. And as an adult, it's interesting which stuff really sort of resonated and chimed with me. Because, I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't have any idea. Even in high school, I didn't really have any idea what I wanted to do with my life in a serious way. I took it very seriously. I thought I was on top, but looking back on it, I'm like, I didn't know who I was. I had no idea what was happening.
I mean, none of us do. And,
but that's what seems so striking in the late movie here is how you see these characters seem to illustrate a real maturity beyond their high school years. They're silly.
Mm-hmm.
But there it is, so that's kind of what was new about it, watching it this time to me.
You also have this.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you also have while, they're at the parade and Ferris is singing the songs, Cameron is talking about how, Ferris is so perfect and knows what to do all the time and everything. And Sloane says to Cameron, what do you want to do with your life? And he's like, nothing. And she says, yeah, me too. And then there's a line where she says, what do you think Ferris is going to do? Which I thought that was interesting, where it's like she's not really sure what, if there's a future for them or not. It was kind of the idea that I got from that scene.
Yeah.
And then that's later, what you're talking about is later in the movie where, they're talking about getting married.
When we start the movie, we get to see some wonderful depictions of how boring high school is. Great shots of terminally bored students and some incredible character bit parts of teachers. Famously is Bueller, right?
And Stein.
The roll call. And it isn't just that. So we get the principal, Ed Rooney, is a master character. I mean, he's just so wonderful. And the secretary is hilarious too. And I did, as an adult this time, find myself just shaking my head being like, oh, wow. There's just a perfect cast of supporting characters.
Oh, yeah.
Because we've seen the principal who gets obsessed with catching, nailing the Dennis the Menace character, whether it's Spicoli or whatever. And I don't know that I've ever seen it as perfectly realized as I have in this film. They get their time to shine. And he is a clown, but he's also a human. There's some time when he's like basically breaking into Ferris's house to catch him. And I had the thought as an adult being like, no, you would not even in 1986 would you break into a student's house.
Yeah.
I don't care how badly you wanted to punish.
Yeah.
Again, it's a cartoon, but the things you notice as an adult, you're just like, no. And his sister hates him. So Jennifer Grey is the sister.
It's funny to go back and watch these movies from this era because I had not noticed it before this time. But in the scene where Ben Stein's saying Bueller, and the girl who says,
I think he's saying,
I heard, blah, blah, blah. And that's Christy Swanson.
Yeah.
Who went on to be a star. And then you have later in the movie Charlie Sheen, who wasn't a star yet. And I think I read not long ago that was shot right around the time of Platoon. Like, I think Platoon had not come out yet. Because I think maybe it was later in 86 or it was 87. So it was like
Apocalypse Now?
No. Isn't Charlie Sheen in Platoon?
I don't think so. Charlie Sheen is Apocalypse Now.
No, that's Martin Sheen.
Oh, that's Martin Sheen. Right. Oh, is he?
You talk and I'll look, but I'm pretty sure that Charlie Sheen.
Well, I'm talking now, and that's what I'm talking while my friend is looking up things on the computer. And now I'm done talking. I can't think of anything else to say. Here's what I'll say. Chris and Chris Talk Movies at gmail.com. That's our handle. Smash that like and subscribe button. Leave us a comment. Oh, it's so great to hear from you folks.
Platoon.
And
Yeah, so he did Ferris Bueller's Day Off, then his next movie was The Wraith, and then after that was Platoon.
The Wraith, which we have done that was our first episode.
That was our first episode, yeah.
And the sound quality on it is terrible, but
those all came out in 1986.
Wow.
So yeah,
Platoon,
he was
okay.
not a.
All right.
He had been in Red Dawn, and then some other movies I've never heard of before. So this was like his sixth movie, Charlie Sheen. So yeah,
well,
he wasn't a star yet.
He did have a famous dad.
But he did pretty well.
All that Tiger Blood.
All that, Tiger Blood. So, some other, another thing that was very, innovative that they did was the closing credits. And while they have, Rooney going, and the line this time that I laughed the hardest at is when he gets on the school bus and he sits next to the girl and she says, "Would you like a gummy bear? They've been in my pocket. They're real warm." I literally laughed out loud at that, just sitting. And then he looks over and the kid has the book folder and it says "Save Ferris" on it,
Yeah.
And so then famously, they do the post-credit thing where he comes up and says, "You're still here? The movie's over." And I wonder how many kids watched Deadpool and had no idea what that was referencing.
No idea what that was from. I do think that many movies since have borrowed from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh yeah.
What year did Home Alone happen? Because there's
Home
a lot
Alone
of
was
Home Alone
1990, I believe.
There's a lot of
that's
Home
a John
Alone
Hughes. Yeah, that's a John Hughes movie also.
Yeah.
Another
idea of the little Rube Goldberg machines he builds for himself, right? To the snoring and the.
I'm sure this has been examined by other people, but you talked about Cameron, the affluence of his family, and Ferris's family is, they don't appear to be rich, but they're
not
upper middle. They're upper middle class, right? And you have Home Alone, where they live in this mansion basically, and people always reference now like what that would, what you would your job, and it's like not only do they live in a mansion, but they have the money to take all of these family members to Europe, right? So it's like, how much money is this guy, is this dad making? But that's something that you see over and over again in John Hughes movies, other than The Breakfast Club, where you have, these kids of kind of these different socioeconomic backgrounds. But kind of one of the through lines is these affluent families. And I don't know I don't know enough about John Hughes to know if like that was his upbringing, or if just, he just wanted to portray wealthy people on screen because people want to see that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fairly common. I don't think that's unique to John Hughes. I mean, unless it's 8 Mile and you're portraying living in a trailer park, or
I think
All
some
in
of
the
it just comes
Family
down.
as a sitcom, right? Unless you're saying, look at this socioeconomic status of this family is important. And the other end of it would be the Fresh Prince. Like, oh, hi, we live in a mansion and there's a butler, right? Otherwise, the default middle of the road is like Friends, where these are just people who have to live with roommates. But I mean, it's a palace. I've lived in New York, and nobody can afford this. This apartment doesn't exist. This is insane, right? And so I think there's just a sort of default, like, we don't have to worry about money. We live in a nice place, and and that's always
some of it. I'm sure is just escapism, like, oh, people want to see people with money. And also probably, I don't know if John Hughes would have been at this point yet, but you probably, if somebody's made hit movies for a while, they live in a big house and everybody they know lives in a big house. So that's just going to be the reality that they're portraying, but I don't know.
I mean,
Who
the
knows
other
if that
thing
was
that
a conscious
always
thing.
The other thing that always stuck with me about this movie that I realized even as a kid that nobody makes any mention of in the film is that so his sister, who hates him, she just can't stand. He's clearly like the favorite of the family. The
Golden
parents
child.
dote on him, and he's got them wrapped around their finger, and she's this kind of glowering sourpuss. And she is so angry that this guy is skipping school and getting away with it that she spends her whole day trying to, like Candace and Phineas and Ferb, trying to ruin his fun. And I'm like, she's skipping school too.
Yeah.
I mean, she's not in school. She's so angry that he's cutting class. I'm like, you're cutting class and you're just not having any fun. He's out having fun. And you're spending your whole, he's like, oh, it's a perfect day. Who could be in school on a day like this? And she's spending it trying to ruin somebody else's good time.
Yeah.
Like Principal Rooney, because he's not following the rules. And it's interesting to me. The movie doesn't do this, but it depicts these characters behaving these ways. And it's interesting to me at this age to start to have a thread of thought being like, what's motivating this? Like Rooney really puts himself through hell trying to catch this kid and doesn't. And we're supposed to feel happy because he's he's wound too tight and he's a jerk. But he really gets the rough end of it. Like he gets pretty messed up. And then the sister meets this bad boy, this Charlie Sheen guy, and she gets a great dopey, like they kiss or something. And she's falling in puppy love with this bad kid, bad seed. And, at the end of the movie, she kind of lets Ferris off the hook. She covers for him. And so we get this happy ending, but it lets me just think for a second. It's like, what's the psychology underlying these characters? What's driving them to behave in this way, And again, the movie doesn't explicate it. The movie doesn't unpack it. The movie just shows you what everybody does. They don't stop and talk about their feelings. When the only person who does that in the movie is Ferris, and he does it directly to the camera, and he doesn't go very deep.
Right.
His take is sort of like, what's the point of worrying about it? There's nothing, you can't change the weather, and on a perfect day like this, you got to try and have as much fun as you can. Yeah. There's a sort of a sub-thesis of like, I need to get Cameron out of his shell. Like Cameron won't do this on his own, so I got to kind of drag him out of his shell and show him that life can be fun.
Because he really cares about
that either. He does.
He really cares about Cameron.
He does.
And when Cameron, causes the Ferrari to go through the back of the garage, Ferris wants to take the blame for it. So he's a stand-up friend in that regard.
Yeah.
And
for as much of a bully as he is throughout the first part of the movie, he's really pushing Cameron to do things outside of Cameron's comfort zone to the point where you got like, he said no, man.
Yeah. And with Ferris also, I think he's not and this is instantly gonna date me. If younger people are listening to this and might have no idea who I'm talking about here. He's not an Eddie Haskell like character. He tricks his parents and he tries to trick he's tricking everybody at school, but he's not it's not like an Eddie Haskell who pretended to be nice and then is like this Weasley kid,
Right.
He's a nice kid. He's likable,
right.
But he's just trying to game the system,
Right. Yes, and his shenanigans are very Bugs Bunny without the anvils and the murder. It's just all very like, line one is his friend pretending to be the police chief. It's like,
yeah,
you're Abe Froman, the Sausage King of Chicago. Yep, that's me. Come on, Abe. Let's go somewhere else. No, let's stay there. It's good fun. We want to record another episode. I think we've covered it. Why don't we make this a short one and we can take a little break and we'll do another short one.
Recommendation, I'd say we both would recommend it, right?
Absolutely. I think of certainly of John Hughes films. You could talk about 1986 films in general, but certainly of John Hughes's canon, this one stands up. There's very little to object to.
This has always been probably my favorite of the John Hughes movies. I mean, I like The Breakfast Club. I like 16 Candles. See, he was 16 Candles, right? Or was it Pretty in Pink?
Yep.
And Pretty in Pink?
He was both, yeah.
He was both. And then I think he did Uncle Buck, and he did Home Alone, which I never liked Home Alone that much, but
that was a hugely popular film.
I mean, it was hugely popular, but Ferris Bueller, I think, it resonated the most with me because like you said at the beginning, I think every kid wanted to be Ferris Bueller because it's like he's like the most popular kid in school and he does get away with everything, So yeah, highly, if you haven't seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, it's on, what I watched it on was Paramount Plus. It's on Paramount Plus.
I feel like it was just a part of Apple TV. I said watch it online, and then I kind of clicked one of them, and it just started playing. So, I mean, I think it's available on a number of places.
Probably is, yeah. I don't have Apple TV, but I watched it on Paramount Plus,
But it's a fun enough movie to watch with your family. It's never going to be one of my all-time favorite films, but there's a huge nostalgia factor for me in it that
And this one didn't really have any of the problematic stuff that we talk about in other movies, right? From this era.
I mean,
there's not really.
Rachel pointed out that the entire film was entirely white until the parade sequence in which then they bring in diverse characters and they make that sequence as a point of being like, yeah, Chicago is full of all different kinds of people. Yay. And then you never see anybody but their rich white friends again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, and I was like, okay. I mean, that's actually a lot of Hollywood and I don't think there's any diversity in any of them. It's like, exactly. Yeah. So
any of the John Hughes movies, there's like no diversity in them at all.
I mean, I think so. It's the worth conversation, but it doesn't. You could take offense at it if you want, but I don't think that's specific to this movie. There's no date rapey stuff. There's no homophobia. There's a funny character who is the concierge of a fancy French restaurant that sort of does a thing, but it's not offensively over the top. He's more snooty than he is like overtly. They don't make any mention of it.
Yeah, as a kid, I don't know if I picked up on. He just seemed more. It was more snooty than like if they were trying to portray him as gay.
I think it stands up. I think, and it's full of broad characters. So, there's one little sequence where the sister's at home and the doorbell rings and it's like a bunch of people, guy with a cake, and there's like a strippergram or something that has a funny little rhyme as she shuts the door on before you get to the dirty punchline of the thing, and you're kind of like, oh, it's a kid's movie, but it's a PG-13 joke, I guess.
Yeah, there's like very mild profanity, throughout this, and I wouldn't pretend to have any understanding of what kids are into today, but I think this would be a movie that kids would like.
I think if you're at least 13, you've heard rougher stuff in class.
Yeah, way more. And we were 13 when this came out. Like I said, I can remember,
and we didn't have the internet, and we had heard it all.
No, but yeah, it's highly. I mean, this is one of the best comedies of the 80s.
I thoroughly enjoyed rewatching it. And it was a movie that Rachel and I sat and watched together, which, we just don't find a lot of common ground of stuff that we're willing to, because we all have our own devices. We can watch whatever we want.
Now, did Rachel enjoy revisiting it?
Yeah, okay. I said, do you want to watch Ferris Bueller? We'll pop some popcorn and, open a bottle of wine. And she's like, that sounds great. And we had a great time.
Was it the same that she had not seen it in a long time as well?
Oh, I don't think she'd seen it. And, she doesn't go back and rewatch. She saw it when we were kids, but I don't know that she'd seen it since.
Yeah. But yeah, super highly recommended.
And she kept saying, like, look how young he is. He's adorable. I'm like, I know. It carries the whole movie. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, he was great, in this. And he did some, he was a teen guy there for a while, War
Yeah.
Games.
Yeah, Lady Hawk.
And that,
I think based on the
Lady
success
Hawk,
of
yeah.
this.
Yeah, I saw Lady Hawk in the
War
movie
Games
theater.
is one we might do. I don't know how.
Yeah, we might have to. That'd be
entertaining
interesting to see how that plays today. And then there was Project X, the one with like the chimp in the research lab or whatever. But
One
yeah, he
thing
did.
I want to wrap this up, but one thing we didn't touch on is the soundtrack, which I thought
yeah.
again and again. I was kind of like, oh yeah, boom, boom.
By Yellow.
Yeah,
I mean, that was
the whole soundscape of this movie is this nostalgic trip that just takes you right back, and you're like, he sits up and he's like, they bought it.
Yeah. And that
That's
music
so
where
yeah.
the whole sequence where he's running to get home, and that music that plays da-na-na-na, da-na-na-na, and the like kind of screaming horns and stuff. Yeah, that's I love where he
runs through the house. He's like, "Hey, don't get up. It smells delicious.
Dinner's ready." And they're like, "Who is that?" And then he runs through between the two girls that are in their bikinis sunbathing,
Yeah,
and then
he
he runs by, and then he slowly walks back to Ferris Bueller and shakes the girls. Yeah, it's a classic. I mean,
yeah, it's very Bugs Bunny. It's very live action Bugs Bunny without the big mallets and the like anvils on people. It's just
it's pretty easy to find. It's not like one of these that's a lost movie. So watch it if you haven't seen it, or if it's been a long time since you've seen it, watch it again.
Sure, you're looking for something fun. Watch Ferris Bueller again, man. It's a fun film. Cool. All right. Well, I said Chris and Chris Talk Movies at Gmail. That's our ding dong doing. Do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap up this short episode?
I think that's it.
Then Chris and I gonna talk to y'all next week, baby.